beginning, God created beast and man so that both might live in friendship. Evil men betrayed God's trust and waged bloody wars, not only against their own kind, but against the apes. Our Savior led a remnant of those who survived in search of greener pastures, where ape and human might forever live in friendship.
Welcome to Lawgiver, a Planet of the Apes podcast. My name's Tom Elliot, and if you were to ask me what my favourite Planet of the Apes movie is, I would say the 1968 original, but my second favourite is the third sequel and fourth in the original series overall, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. And in that movie is a character called Hoskins, and Rich Handley describes Hoskins in Lexicon of the Planet of the Apes like this: an agent of the fascist State Security Bureau, ruthless and efficient. He employed torture as well as a truth-inducing device known as the Authenticator to elicit detainees' confessions. In 1991, Hoskins and Chief Inspector Culp interrogated circus owner Armando to make him admit Caesar was the son of ape astronauts Zera and Cornelius. Armando's resistance resulted in the man plummeting to his death from a high window. Now, Hoskins only has a couple of lines in the movie, but he is in it quite a bit, and he certainly makes his mark, as we've just heard. And the actor who played him was H.M. Wynant. And fans of the Twilight Zone will instantly know H.M. Wynant from the classic episode, The Howling Man. And if you're a listener to the Twilight Zone podcast, you will have already heard the interview that I'm going to play for you in a moment. But I was given the great opportunity to speak with H.M. Wynant and the writer of his autobiography, Stephen Peros. The new autobiography is called You Must Believe, and it's a wonderful look at the life and work of H.M. Wynant. But also, as Steve says in the book, it's the story of a Hollywood that doesn't really exist anymore. And the list of people that H.M. Wynant worked with is just staggering. And of particular note to Planet of the Apes fans, he worked with Rod Serling, Charlton Heston, and Kim Hunter. And I'm sure there's several others too. Now, in preparation for doing this interview, I checked out some of H.M. Wynant's other interviews, and unfortunately he doesn't really have any recollection of working on Conquest, so I couldn't really ask him much about it. And I think, as you'll hear in the interview, it's completely understandable because he was a very prolific and hard-working actor of the day, and he would move on to project after project. But in the book, You Must Believe, Stephen Peros has unearthed a few anecdotes about his work on Conquest, either from conversations with H.M. Wynant or past interviews, so there is some Apes content in there. So while this interview that I'm going to play for you in a moment is light on Apes content, it's still a conversation with an original Planet of the Apes actor and a wonderful, warm human being. Well, two wonderful human beings, in fact, because Steve was great to talk to as well, and the friendship between these two men is something very special, and you'll hear that in a moment too. Now, if you want to keep up with Stephen and you're in the Hollywood area, there are going to be signings and things like that coming up, so follow his Twitter at Stephen G. Peros, and I'll put a link in the show notes, and maybe you can get your book signed by H.M. Wynant and Stephen as well. So without further ado, let's hear from the man who played Hoskins in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, H.M. Wynant. You know, sometimes doing this show, I cannot believe my luck, and today I feel like the luckiest man that I get to speak to the legend, H.M. Wynant. H.M., welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And you're joined today by Steve Peros, your biographer. Steve, welcome as well.
Thank you. I have to show the book for everybody. We of all of H.M.'s 80 years in Broadway, television, and movies, we chose for the title of his book, You Must Believe, which is, of course, his iconic line in the Howling Man episode, which we have featured on the cover.
Beautiful. I've really been enjoying it. It's such a great book. How did this all come about?
Well, I was writing another book for Bear Manor Media, the publisher, a book of I was the editor, and I was writing eight chapters. I had a team of writers writing 5 apiece about monster movies of the 50s and 60s. And I noticed on his website, they said they are always welcoming pitch ideas for books on old television, golden age television, and also character actors who other people have not done biographies on. And I said, well, I've known H.M. Wynant for 30 years. We started professionally, and now we're like family. And I said, would you like that book? And he said, absolutely. So Bear Manor was behind it from the start. And so we went through interviews. I did a lot of recording of interviews with H.M. I went over past interviews with H.M. and interviews with people. When you get to 97, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of coworkers still around who I can ask questions, but there are some. So they are in the book, as well as his family and his wife and children.
So H.M., did you enjoy this process, going through, going into your history and speaking with Steve about it?
Oh, God, yes. It's always a pleasure to work with Steve. Really is. He's an old friend. I love it.
I understand you were in one of his plays. Is that right?
He was asking about Carla Boy?
Carla Boy.
Yeah.
If you ask me who's the author of Carla Boy, I wouldn't have known. Now I do. It's really wild. I don't retain a hell of a lot. When I work, Carla Boy, I did a play and Steve wrote it. That all comes back right now. But after I finish working on a project like that, I literally erase the board, and it's so far in the past I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Who was in it, why I did it, who did it, who wrote it. I dismiss all that information. I don't retain it.
Yeah. So we've jogged his memory. Particularly, there are things that made such an impression. But back then, and we talk about it in the book, is particularly television. This was work. This was you went in on a Monday. They got your script Sunday night. You looked at it, you went in on a Monday and a Tuesday, and then you were done. And then on Thursday, you started another episode of another show. Yeah. And you said, if you retained all of these things, you'd go mad.
Yeah, I never retained anything. I literally erase the blackboard and move on.
The thing is, as well, you were so prolific. You did so many things that it's understandable that you just can't remember those things. Was it important for you to just keep working?
Oh, absolutely. That's my whole lifeblood. Without that, I don't exist.
So I learned a lot of great things in the book, but one of them was that you started out as a dancer. And could you tell us a little bit about how you started in the business?
As a dancer, Jerome Robbins.
Oh, I started. Oh, absolutely. I was when I came to New York, I came as a dancer. I was trained only as a dancer. I was very good.
He trained in Detroit, and then came to New York. The youngest child who said, "You know what? It was a musical family, but they were musical with instruments." And so they didn't approve of him going to New York and treading the boards on Broadway to try to be a dancer. But he went and did it on his own, And you were running out of money. And who hired you for high button shoes? What great choreographer?
Jerry Robbins.
Yeah.
Wow.
My contact with him was the beginning, really, of everything, because that was a huge contact, gave credibility. And from that point on, it was one step after another. And here I am. Yeah,
High Button Shoes was a tremendous hit. He toured in it. You were on that show for at least a year, I would.
A long time.
Yeah.
So when you started acting in theatre, some of the names that you worked with are unbelievable. Have you got any memories of those people? People like Katharine Hepburn, Laurence Olivier?
Oh, God, yes, sure. Well, Katharine Hepburn was like the mother of the company. And well, we all loved her. I loved her, and she was just easy to be with.
She borrowed something from you, didn't she?
I know, my clothes. Oh God, yeah. We played tennis together, and she had no tennis clothes, so she wore mine. Yeah, I remember now.
Mhm.
We played. We did play a lot of tennis together, and
Mhm.
needed clothes to do that, and then so she
You know,
wore my clothes.
Since Tom is in the UK, I don't think I'm presuming that. I love can you recall the story about when you were on tour with Olivier and you got to the theater first. It was empty and you went out into the house in the dark.
Yeah,
And then what happened?
yeah. I was in the house. I was just looking at the stage but I was in dark because the house was black.
Mm-hmm.
And he came onto the stage, and I remember he went up to the very edge to the footlights, looked out at the stage. He couldn't see me. The theater was empty, and he screamed at the top of his voice, "I'm not afraid of you!" And then he turned around and walked off.
It was like a ritual he would do, you know?
Yeah.
Just-
He had to convince himself that he wasn't afraid,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which all actors are. They're terrified until you start getting that first sentence out, and then it becomes, yeah, okay, I got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just need to
But
get
there's always
moving
that
and then you're
fear,
okay.
always,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
with every actor that I've ever known.
Particularly on the stage doing
And
live.
particularly
Yeah.
lead actors, the stars. Believe me, they're terrified.
Yeah, you
The-
said Rex Harrison would knock back a whiskey every night before he went on stage. Rex Harrison. Yeah.
Huge glass of scotch.
That's one way to do it.
Mhm.
So, Steve, was this the hardest part of the book to research, the theatre years?
No, you know, I use the internet for the power of good. Fortunately, there are things out there, so much out there that people have documented. It was really fascinating because so much of what he did in New York and when he first came to LA was live television. So you're able to really know exactly what he was doing on a given day. And the same thing, there are shooting dates documented about films that he was involved with. So I was able to correspond and dates with his personal life. And I would let him know. I said, you know, H.M., after you did that live TV drama with Boris Karloff and Anthony Perkins and Susan Strasberg, do you know that 4 days later your son was born? So I got to really picture the life of someone who was doing 2 hit Broadway shows in a row with a couple in between, smaller ones in between, but 2 long-running Broadway shows in a row at night, and then doing all this, the very birth of television during the day while balancing a personal life with his first 2 children that were born while he was in New York. So the research, fortunately, the hardest part of the research was was not being able to watch some of the very early things he did, which which don't even exist. Some of them, you know, they were kinescopes, they were shot over. Fortunately, I got to see, in terms of the early work, all of the Playhouse 90s. His very first appearance, which was Studio One with Charlton Heston when they did Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah.
It's so fortunate that I have someone like this.
Mhm.
I can't remember any of it.
Well, you remember some of it.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a lot of
the minute
yeah.
you mention it, of
Yeah.
course, then it's
Yeah.
becomes vivid.
Yeah.
But without you, I'm a total blank.
Well, yeah, it really is like
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, really.
You know, it is like when you meet a coworker who you haven't. Someone says, "Oh, you remember that job we all worked on 5 years ago, 10 years ago?" I don't remember. But if they mention to you a specific event, then the
Right.
memories come
Then
back.
It comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't expect you to remember this one because You know, on one of those Playhouse 90s, you actually did a Rod Serling episode, didn't you? You did The Comedian with Mickey Rooney and Kim Hunter.
Right. See, now that you mention it, of course. Yeah, of course I remember, yeah.
And Mickey, tell him about Mickey Rooney, how he'd always come to the set all the time.
Oh, God, yeah. He'd always arrive to rehearsal or whatever. He'd always have a beautiful lady on his arm, a different one every time. Where he found all these women, I'll never know, but they all loved him dearly.
And he would say to Frankenheimer, "Can we, find a place for her in this?" And
Right.
and they did, because fortunately they could on that, but because there was a lot of crowd stuff, the backstage of the show, the shots of the audience, because it was about a Sid Caesar-like, Milton Berle-like comedian, big successful TV comedian who the world loved, but didn't know that behind the scenes he was an absolute scoundrel and nasty. And but there were a lot of shots of the crowds and people working on the show. So Rooney would always get the pretty girl that he was seeing each day of rehearsal into the final show when they shot it live.
It was all shot. Everything was live in those days.
Yeah.
Which is the best way, really. It's a shame that disappeared, but it did.
Can you recall, did Rod Serling actually turn up to that one? Was he around when you were shooting Playhouse 90?
I do remember, but I can't visualize it.
Yeah, it's more likely he showed up there.
He did show up.
Because, he wrote it. That was live presentation. Less likely that he was on. H.M. I know doesn't think he actually was on set during the shooting of The Howling Man. He doesn't think Serling himself was there, because it was very much about Charles Beaumont, the writer, who coincidentally were sitting in front of a poster for a Charles Beaumont scripted movie, the George Pal Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe.
One thing I noticed, H.M., is that when you started working in TV and movies, you would never do like a long-running TV series. You would always keep moving on to the next thing, onto the next thing. Was that just the way you like to work? Just keep going on to, different shows?
Yeah, absolutely. It's when the show is over, I bury it. It's so far back. I don't even, I'll never even recall it. I just keep moving forward.
Uh-huh.
I remember you told me you were offered a series lead, a regular role. It's in the book, Mike Hammer, that Darren McGavin ultimately played.
Yeah.
And you were saying part of why you said no is it seemed
I was
unattractive to do.
I was offered several series like Mike Hammer. It never appealed to me to do the same damn show over and over and over again. I never accepted that. I would always move forward to something new. It was just the way I was. Actually, I regret it financially. That's my only real regret, because financially it was the way to go. And I turned my back on it, which I shouldn't. I should have taken a little of it, but I didn't. I liked moving on.
Steve, one of the things you say in the book is that this isn't just H.M.'s story. This is a bigger story. It's about a Hollywood that doesn't exist anymore.
When H.M. was in New York doing Broadway, yes, people would talk about the difference between film actors and TV actors. They certainly spoofed that in Singing in the Rain in 1952. But there wasn't that distinction in television. So you have this television live medium, then there's this live medium called theater, and they rated the Broadway theaters and said, we need you to do our... So you have these people doing stage caliber work, which is why all of those live shows...
While I was doing Broadway, during the daytime, every once in a while, there would be a wonderful film thing that I got involved with. They came and found me, actually, and that's how it all started.
Yeah. I mean, here he is working with Olivier and Rex Harrison.
Yeah.
All these, people. And so, of course, he's doing Shakespeare with Katharine Hepburn. So, of course, his first TV is going to be Studio One doing Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah, it never occurred to me to get into that field. I was strictly a stage actor.
I see.
But they came and got me and brought me in, and that's how it happened. It's nothing I looked for.
Yeah, that's the thing. An interesting thing to know about H.M., which is consistent in his career. Was not only not seeking stardom, it wasn't what drove him, um, and shaped his choices, but he also wasn't seeking film and TV. He came to New York to work on the stage.
Absolutely.
And as a dancer, but then when he got his taste, but he also trained as an actor back in Detroit. And then when he got a real taste of doing a role, when one of his understudy parts, because he was in the chorus, the dance chorus of High Button Shoes, which was a real task.
Yeah.
I mean, they played characters and they played Keystone Cops and then they played this and that. But then he got a taste of doing a role that he understudied, Uncle Willie, and he realized, wow, I like acting. Even though he was the next, they rated the chorus of that show for a little show called Guys and Dolls, and H.M. was cast in the dance chorus of Guys and Dolls, and he walked away from it during rehearsals to accept a straight acting gig.
Right. I left Guys and Dolls
and never danced professionally again.
No, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So did that come quite easy to you, H.M., the acting? Did you just kind of take to it straight away?
Well, I did both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I just separated and went the acting way.
Yeah, the dancing was really acting. I mean, we don't have a record of High Button Shoes, but those guys were playing characters. It was always acting, and H.M. trained as an actor and did acting in college at Wayne State.
That's right.
He did live radio dramas. So it wasn't that he came and he was a dancer and someone said, why don't you try looking at a script? And he said, I'll try.
Yeah.
Shakespeare is what got him excited about theater as a teenager. And so reading, that actually helped him with his dyslexia, which no one knew what the word was, but he realized as a poor student.
Yeah, I was very dyslexic, and nobody knew much about dyslexia back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was my big problem, but eventually we discovered it and we worked around it and got rid of it.
And the rhythms of Shakespeare kind of broke through for him as he read it. And so he was always attracted to acting. He just was pursuing dance because he enjoyed it. And then so it wasn't a new thing when he started acting. It was just exercising the thing he also wanted to do.
So we have to talk about the Twilight Zone. Is this the thing you get asked about the most, H.M.?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think it was.
And I guess at that time you had no idea that it was going to be such a...
Oh, no, it was just another show.
Yeah.
You never know which one is going to catch on and really be... it was very hard. They're all judged equally, the same.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know which one is better than the other as an actor because they're all wonderful. One of them just turns out to be the one that everyone gravitates to, and that's the one you...
But you got to work with the great John Carradine. Do you remember anything about him?
About John Carradine?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a character.
and rehearsals, how there were no rehearsals because
we never got to rehearse because of him. He would just tell one story after another. We just sat there. We had a wonderful time.
Uh-huh.
And I think we went through the script maybe twice. But the rest of it was a party. It was wonderful. And he was, of course, the instigator of all of that. He was kind of wonderful. But he was full of stories, just full. It was a pleasure to be with him.
And I understand you'd worked with the director Douglas Hayes before, and he chose you specifically to be in The Howling Man. Is that right?
I don't think you worked with him before, but you do have a story about how Doug Hayes and you...
Doug Hayes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. I used to take my children to a kiddie park, and they'd go on the ponies, and I'd watch them ride around. And next to me was Doug Hayes with his kids on ponies riding around. he looked at me, "Hi, H. Oh, hi, how are you?" And we acknowledged each other, and that was the end of the day. Then I get the call. Obviously, he was at that time working on a project, trying to cast certain roles, and he looked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously, I appealed to him for a particular role, a good role, and I got the call. I got the part. It was all because we were at the kiddie park, and that's how it all began. That's how we came close together, and we worked a lot together for after that, and it helped me a tremendous amount.
You know, HM, one of my favorite roles of yours is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes,
Oh yeah,
where you play you're a real bad guy. Did you enjoy playing the bad guys?
I better enjoy it. I did an awful lot of them. No, I really did. Those were always the better parts anyway. They really were. They were the more interesting roles, the more involved than the straight characters, which I played also. But the the those character roles were really the better ones.
Yeah.
More interesting, better to play, easier to play actually because they had more body to them.
But what I noticed as well, you were always a very physical actor. You were a good fighter, you know. I guess, did that come from being a dancer? You were very fit and healthy.
No, that comes from being an actor.
Yeah.
They are physical, and as an actor, it makes you physical. If you're not physical, you can't do it.
And I guess one of your most famous fights was with Elvis Presley, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was the big one.
Mm-hmm.
We came close to hitting each other. It was a damn good one. I think we spent at least for one fight scene the entire day. I think 8 solid hours.
Wow.
Yet doing one fight scene.
Yeah, there's very few. He said that there were stuntmen there, but they were used very minimally, and you could see it if you watch
Yeah.
the film on DVD. It's because Elvis was a trained in martial
He was a
arts.
karate guy, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
so you said you had to watch out with the
Yeah.
punches with Elvis. You had
Oh,
to be
yeah, yeah.
on your guard.
But he was very good. He knew how to get very, very close without really hitting.
Mm-hmm.
Our fight scenes were wonderful,
Mhm.
and they were fun to do. And we're very good at it.
Mhm.
Was he a nice guy to be around? Was he, you know,
Best.
good fun to
One
be
of the
with?
best. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And tell him about when you complimented his Rolex. What happened?
Yeah, I was just going to
Okay.
tell him that. I complimented his watch and he took it off and gave it to me.
Wow.
I mean, it was just wild. He was wearing this beautiful watch and he
Mm-hmm.
took it off and just gave it to me. And unfortunately, very soon after that, I lost it. I was washing my car. I took the watch off, put it down, finished washing the car, and drove away. And the watch was still on the ground.
Oh my goodness.
Went back to get it. It was gone.
That would have been your retirement funds right there, Elvis Presley's watch.
Yep.
That was
Yeah.
a really tragic loss because it had meaning to me more than the watch.
Mhm.
It was a tragic one. I never forget it.
So, are there any other kind of big stars that you remember who you particularly enjoyed working with?
Katharine Hepburn.
I think you mentioned to me, when people were on the rise, they were just another colleague,
Yeah.
But like when he worked with Charlton Heston in New York, but when the person was a legend and he knew it, those are the stories he really holds on to. Like when you were Run Silent, Run Deep, Clark Gable,
Oh,
suddenly
yeah.
having a one-on-one scene with the King, you know?
Hmm.
What was that like? I mean, you said
Well, it was very, because he was the king, especially at that time.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of actors, he was the top, the king. And
Hmm.
we had one big scene together where I literally had his head in my hand, and I was so impressed. It
Wonderful.
was really, it was really a tremendous moment for me.
Hmm.
Beside the scene we're playing, it was just to have his head in my hand like that. I'll never forget it.
and one of your first Playhouse 90s was a filmed, Playhouse 90 generally is known for being a live show, all these amazing people in a studio coordinated for 90 minutes, and it's awesome. But there's a percentage that were filmed Playhouse 90s, and H.M. did two
Hmm.
of those.
Yeah.
And one of them one of his earliest ones he did with a living legend, which was Errol Flynn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
do you remember the story of how you were on set
I
and there was an
remember
old man in a chair?
yeah, this old man was sitting, we were sitting, I I ran up to they 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 marked the cameras. They rehearsed the cameras first with our doubles,
Yeah, stand-ins. Yeah.
our stand-ins, and we're sitting there, and finally I were called for. I put on my boots real quick, and I go over there and I stand on my mark, and I look back, and he's sitting there, and he extremely slow. I think he did it on purpose. And he put one boot on, then the next one. We'd all be waiting. He'd walk very slowly. And he'd get to his spot, and we'd find that he's there, and we're ready to go. But he took his time.
But and also it was almost like that chart of the evolution of man. You said he went from an old man,
Oh God,
and then
yeah,
suddenly when he hit his mark, who he was.
yeah. Every step he took, he got younger. I
Wow.
swear to God, every set he got younger and younger. He finally hit his spot, and by God, he was younger than me. It was really wild. That's a wonderful actor.
So there's a ton of stories like this in the book. It really is wonderful. So, Steve, what are you proudest of with this book?
Oh, that's well, it's I'm a writer and a storyteller in a lot of different mediums. I'm I'm produced screenwriter. I've sold TV pilots. I've had 2 plays published with Samuel French, which is now Concord Theatricals. They've been done in the UK. Um, and recently, I just like telling stories in any medium that'll have me. And in the last few years, I've gotten into being a graphic novel and comic book writer, which is a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
I wrote a series of books called Stoker and Wells, which is about a fictitious pairing of a grumpy 40-something theater manager of the Lyceum Theater named Bram Stoker, and
Hmm.
and then having an adventure with a 20-something ne'er-do-well named H.G. Wells. And then, but I had never written a biography, even though I'd written film history and historical things and reviews. So it was exciting. This is the opportunity to do something new and to do it for and with a dear friend,
Hmm.
and all things that I just love the period. I love 1950s New York. I love the late 40s, 1950s New York. The dawn of all of that. It allowed me to piece together all these things I know tangentially, and then suddenly see a chronology. That's why I always say whether this book is a great gift for not just someone who knows H.M.'s work, but anyone who's interested in the birth of television and what it was
Yeah.
like to be a working actor. And every actor should just read it, to just know what it was like to be a working actor in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. And as he passed each of those decades in terms of age.
Because I was always doing a play on Broadway in one theater or another, but from the play, I had a daytime thing about television. I was like a pioneer in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would
Absolutely.
be doing television
Yeah.
here and there, but that was like pioneer days. Television was
Yeah. No real unions. I mean,
No.
you go in, you make like $10 to be in the dance chorus, $40 if you have a speaking role.
Right.
He said Charlton Heston to star as Petruchio in Studio One, Taming of the Shrew probably made about $140.
Right. He
Wow.
got over $100. That was a lot of money.
Right, that's true.
So, H.M., are you happy with how the book turned out?
Oh God, yeah. No, this
Yeah.
man is wonderful.
Mhm.
He really is a real talent.
And I got to use a lot of many of the photos come from his archive. A lot of the stuff comes from their personal. But particularly there's a 2-page on the Broadway tour, the official New York tour of
Mhm.
Sound of Music in the 1970s with Shirley Jones. Those are studio photographs. I don't think anyone's ever published them. So
It's
they-
nice to
yeah.
have this all published in a book now.
Mhm.
So, because I will eventually lose all of the other stuff, it'll all disappear. But the book will always be here. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we're all very grateful.
I'm grateful that he trusted me with his story.
Mhm.
He read it. I would give he and his wife Paula chapters to look at, to vet, to correct me if I was wrong or if he didn't like a quote I was using. Yeah, it was quite enjoyable. Here we're gonna have a quick wave from H.M.'s wife Paula, who's here saying hello.
Hi, Paula.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for driving H.M. over.
No problem.
Babe, you guys have been together how long?
Oh, 38 years, something like that, 39 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
Married
wow.
for almost 32, so
Mm-hmm.
long time.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, so she's a huge help to it, helping to collect not only HM but photos, stories.
Yeah.
And-
I couldn't exist without her. I swear to God, I really couldn't.
Oh, that's
I
wonderful.
would just
That's
drift
wonderful.
into the woodwork.
H.M., I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. But not only for being the star of one of our favorite TV shows, but your incredible body of work that's brought us all so much happiness. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And Steve, thanks for your time too and giving us the gift of this book about H.M.'s amazing career. I wish you every success with it.
Thank you very much. We're getting a lot of requests for interviews. We're going to be doing a big book signing in Hollywood
Wow.
towards the end of November. So yeah, it's been fun to get the attention for this book and for HM. Long overdue.
We still wait, my children. But as I look at apes and humans, living in friendship, harmony, and at peace, now some 600 years after Caesar's death, at least we wait with hope for the future.